Hello there, adventurous internet traveler. What corner of the world are you watching from today? A cozy village, a buzzing city, or maybe from somewhere mysterious? Type it in the comments. Surprise me. And if this video tickles your brain, don't keep it to yourself. Pass it along to your crew. The rough strands of the rope tore into my skin, biting into my wrists like tiny predators gnawing at flesh and tendon. But that pain was nothing compared to the image before me. My wife of 15 years calmly adjusting the angle of a camera mounted on a tripod. She was setting up to record the end of my life. You want to know what hurts most, Dean? Her voice drifted across the porch like she was talking about what to pick up from the store. You actually believed I loved you. I strained against the restraints again. The chair legs scraped loudly on the wood planks, inching me closer to the ledge, where the deck gave way to a 200-foot vertical drop. Shatter Ridge was more than a name, it was a warning. One mistake, and my body would be dashed across the rocks below. She kept scrolling through her phone, unfazed. The life insurance will finally set me free. Chad's already in Denver, waiting with the signed divorce packet. A crooked smile tugged at her lips. Your suicide note practically wrote itself. Losing your job, money running out, fake alcoholism, it all fit the narrative. Shad Delacroix. I should have seen it coming. That tech bro had been hovering around her boutique for ages, always pretending to help with marketing and expansion. I built that place with my own hands, put in late hours after construction jobs to give her something real. How long's this been going on? I rasped, throat raw like I'd swallowed gravel. 2 years, she said without looking up. Chad's been patient. What she didn't know was the drug was wearing off. Whatever she'd slipped into my drink, it had tasted wrong, syrupy. Antifreeze. I recognized the signs. The nausea, the fatigue, the heavy limbs. I'd seen it before. But she'd guessed wrong on the dose. She hadn't accounted for a man my size. Terry knows I'm up here, I lied. Melanie laughed like I'd cracked a joke. Sheriff Moon, your bar buddy? She sneered. He thinks you came up here to clear your head. I made sure of that. Then she pressed the record button. This is Dean Calloway. October 15th, 2024, she said, impersonating my voice. Her delivery was practiced, eerily familiar. I can't handle the shame. I've lost everything. This is the only way out. The knot on my left wrist had been tied by someone who'd clearly never touched a toolbox. I'd been strapping down lumber and equipment since I was 16. There's always a weak spot, if you know how to find it. You made a mistake, Mel, I said. She paused the recording. What did you say? You forgot I spent years in combat zones. The loop slipped loose. It would take more than a bored housewife and her rich boyfriend to finish me off. I lunged. Before she could react, I was on her. Decades of hard labor and swinging framing hammers had left me strong. We crashed to the deck. Her phone skidded across the boards toward the cliff's edge. I snatched it just before it disappeared into the abyss. She clawed at my face, nails drawing blood. Help! Somebody help me! She screamed into the empty mountains. I pinned her arms down. No one's coming. Isn't that what you planned? The phone's screen lit up, damning evidence displayed like a confession. Text between her and Chad. Pictures of our home. Screenshots of the insurance policies. A fake suicide note in her handwriting. Even a contingency plan labeled fall option in case the poisoning didn't work. Dean, please, she whispered. We can fix this. We'll split everything 3 ways. 3 ways? I asked, standing over her as she lay on the deck. You, me, and Chad? You think I'm that much of a fool? She started to panic. Where are you going? To get some real rope, I said, walking toward the cabin. Don't move. 1 step the wrong way and that drop finishes what you started. But when I came back, the porch was empty. The keys were gone from the kitchen counter. Fresh tire marks in the dirt showed she'd bolted, likely racing toward Chad with some wild story about a violent husband gone mad. I had less than an hour before I'd be on every wanted list in the state, so I stood there on the porch where I was supposed to take my final breath and watch the last light of the sun slide behind the Colorado horizon. I was alive, but the fight was only beginning. The red light on the camera hadn't blinked off, it was still capturing everything. I stepped forward and looked directly into the lens. My name is Dean Calloway. I stated calmly. Earlier today, my wife tried to end my life for a life insurance windfall. She failed. I picked up the camera. This time, I would be the one telling the story. Exactly 3 hours later, I was officially dead. At least that's what the obituary printed in the Denver Post claimed. Terry, my old friend, had filed the report after stumbling upon my truck at the bottom of Miller's Gorge, 20 miles from the remote cabin we used to call home. The explosion, the article said, had been caused by a faulty propane tank I'd supposedly been transporting for a work site. The blaze had burned so fiercely, and the canyon was so deep, they explained, that no remains were recoverable. But I wasn't inside that truck when it went up in flames. I was sitting in a stolen pickup outside a diner in Pueblo, quietly scrolling through my own obituary on a burner phone. The piece was surprisingly touching. Melanie had spared no effort painting our marriage as idyllic and casting herself as the grieving widow. The memorial would be held Thursday at Riverside Chapel. Instead of flowers, guests were encouraged to donate to the Dean Calloway Memorial Fund, an account Melanie had already set up and was managing herself. The policy I'd taken out on my life was worth $400,000. I headed for Denver and rented a storage unit under the alias Tom Mitchell, my grandfather's original name before he changed it after returning from the war. I paid for 6 months in cash, using money I'd hidden in a rusted toolbox Melanie had never once looked inside. She used to joke I was hopeless with finances, but growing up in foster care had taught me 2 things: always have an escape plan and never let anyone know what you're really worth. That unit became my war room. I stocked it with survival gear, extra clothes, tools, and an old laptop I'd picked up at a pawn shop. But the most critical item I had in my possession was Melanie's cell phone, still loaded with damning messages and images. Evidence was important, yes, but I wasn't just after proof. What I wanted went deeper. Justice. And justice, I was learning, sometimes looked a lot like revenge. In the week following my staged death, I began shadowing Melanie. She played the mourning widow with unsettling precision, crying at the right moments, accepting condolences and casseroles from neighbors, wearing black while shopping for groceries. But once the sun dipped below the horizon, she would disappear to Chad's penthouse downtown, not returning until daybreak. Chad Delacroix lived like a king. A rich tech entrepreneur with questionable ties to weapons trafficking, he carried himself like a man above the law. His glass-walled condo towered over the skyline, playing host to glittering parties where elite guests made handshake deals behind closed doors. But Chad wasn't as invulnerable as he imagined. For the next 21 days, I studied his habits, tracked his contacts, and combed through his corporate records at the city clerk's office. What I found was enough to make federal agents salivate. Chad was funneling military-grade hardware to clients with no legal right to possess them. If the FBI got their hands on the customer list I uncovered, Chad's days of freedom would be numbered. Still, I found something even more powerful than a federal investigation. Chad had an ex-wife. Lisa Delacroix was living in a crumbling apartment complex at the edge of town, surviving on alimony and bartered pharmaceuticals from her neighbors. He'd destroyed her in their divorce, took the house, the kids, even repossessed her car. She'd attempted suicide twice in the last year. She was exactly the ally I needed. I knocked on her door one Tuesday afternoon, wearing a thrift store suit and carrying a briefcase packed with forged legal documents I'd printed at the public library. "Miss Delacroix? I'm Tom Mitchell with Hartwell and Associates. I represent certain former associates of your ex-husband." Lisa looked like a woman who had once been stunning, but now wore her suffering like a second skin. "What do you want?" she asked, suspicious. "I'd like to speak with you if I may. This concerns a potential financial settlement you might be eligible for." Her place stank of cigarette smoke and surrender. Empty pill bottles littered the coffee table, and pieces of her divorce paperwork were scattered like confetti after a bad party. "Mr. Delacroix has been concealing significant overseas assets," I explained, flipping open the briefcase. "You're legally entitled to far more than you've been given." The documents I handed her were replicas of real court filings, carefully edited to look legitimate. As she read through pages listing secret accounts and phantom trusts, her disbelief melted into quiet astonishment. "This can't be real," she said, barely above a whisper. "It's entirely real," I said, leaning forward. "But there's a complication." I let the pause settle. "He's planning to remarry. Once he does, his new wife will become the primary heir to everything he owns." Lisa's eyes widened. "Remarry who?" she breathed. I slid a photo across the table, one I'd downloaded from Melanie's Facebook page just days earlier. She and Chad sat smiling at a fancy restaurant, candlelight flickering off the large engagement ring on her finger. "Some grieving widow, huh?" I said. "She's already moved into his condo like nothing ever happened." Lisa's fingers trembled as she stared at the image. "He swore under oath that he'd never remarry," she murmured. "Said it in court." "Chad's made a career out of empty promises," I replied. "None of them ever meant a damn thing." I began collecting the forged documents into a neat stack. "There's still a way forward," I told her. "But if you want justice, you'll have to move quickly." She looked up with hollow eyes. "What kind of way?" "If you filed a new civil claim, the court could potentially freeze his bank accounts while they reviewed the case. But that kind of legal muscle doesn't come cheap." I glanced her over. "And let's be real here. Delacroix, right? You don't look like someone sitting on a pile of cash." Her expression crumpled. "I'm not," she whispered. "He drained everything. Every account, every card." Then a pause. "Is there some other option?" I let the silence stretch just long enough to create tension. "Your ex has been smuggling controlled tech overseas," I finally said. "If someone brought solid proof to the feds, they'd seize all of it under federal forfeiture laws. And you'd qualify for compensation," I added, "as someone directly harmed by his crimes." She leaned forward, cautious but curious. "What kind of evidence?" I placed a flash drive between us on the table. "Names, bank records, logistics routes, enough to end him." She narrowed her eyes. "Where'd you get this?" "Let's just say Chad's burned more bridges than he can count," I said as I rose from my seat. "But your window's closing fast." I headed for the exit. Once he marries Melanie, she'll have spousal privilege. That'll jam up any investigation and years of procedural red tape. Lisa clutched the drive like it was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. "What do I have to do?" "Nothing illegal," I told her. "Walk into the FBI office downtown. Say you found it while cleaning out his old files. Let them take it from there." She hesitated. "Will it actually work?" I looked her in the eyes. "Chad wrecked your life because he thought you'd never fight back. Now's your chance to prove he was wrong." 3 days later, they found Lisa Delacroix unresponsive in her apartment. Apparent overdose. The drive was still in her purse, untouched. Right beside it, a handwritten note confessing that every accusation she made against Chad was a lie. The handwriting was hers, flawless, because I'd coached her through it, convinced her it was just a draft for the FBI. When news of her death broke, Melanie called Chad in a frenzy. I listened in from the audio feed I'd planted inside Chad's penthouse, installed while they were out shopping for rings. "This can't be a coincidence," Melanie said. "Dean dies, now Lisa? It's too perfect." "She was mentally unstable," Chad replied, voice smooth. Everyone knew she was spiraling. "But why now?" she asked. "Why right before the wedding?" "Maybe guilt," he said. "Some people just can't stand to see others happy." There was a pause. Then Melanie's voice uncertain. "Maybe we should postpone." "No," Chad cut in sharply. "We've waited long enough." A beat of hesitation. "What if we're being watched?" He laughed. "By who? Your dead husband?" They both chuckled. I didn't. By sunrise, Melanie's boutique was nothing but charred rubble. The blaze started around 3 in the morning, right in the basement where I'd rerouted the building's electrical system the day before. When fire crews arrived, the flames had already devoured everything. Later, the insurance company's report would blame outdated wiring and poor maintenance. No one asked too many questions. But I left a reminder anyway. Just before the fire took hold, I scrawled, "Remember the ridge across the sidewalk," in thick, blood-red spray paint. The police dismissed it as graffiti, some random act of vandalism, and hosed it clean. But Melanie recognized it. She was on the phone with Chad by dawn, her voice cracking with fear. "He's not dead," she whispered. "Dean's still alive." "That's impossible," Chad said. Terry confirmed they found the truck in the ravine. "Then how do you explain the message? Remember the ridge? Ring any bells?" "Only Dean ever used that nickname for the place." "A lot of folks knew you had a cabin up there," Chad argued. "Sure, but no one ever referred to it as the ridge. That was his thing." I couldn't help but smile as I monitored the call, listening to her nerves unravel over the wiretap on Chad's phone. She was starting to crack. "Even if he made it out of the crash," Chad said, sounding unsure, "he's probably got a busted head, or worse, stumbling through the woods in pieces. And if he didn't?" Melanie's voice had a hard edge. "What if he's okay?" "We tried to kill him, Chad. If he's still breathing and knows what we did, he's got nothing to go on. No hard proof. No evidence. No witnesses. Just the accusations of a man who's supposed to be dead." "I'm scared," she whispered. "Don't be," Chad answered. "I've already arranged for someone to clean this up." That someone turned out to be Vincent Carver, a professional fixer who specialized in disappearing problems, no questions asked. No paper trail, no family, ex-special forces, nothing to tie him down. Carver only dealt in cash and always left behind silence. He was reputed for being unstoppable. But this time, he didn't realize the prey was already hunting him. I'd been monitoring Chad's communications for the past 2 weeks. I knew exactly when and where Carver would make his move. He believed I was hiding somewhere near the old cabin, nursing my wounds, plotting to strike back. He was wrong. I was already set up along a stretch of Highway 285 known as Dead Man's Curve, a narrow pass where reception cuts out, and one mistake looks like an accident. Carver was behind the wheel of a black armored SUV, fully tricked out with bulletproof glass and a reinforced chassis. But none of that matters when a loaded logging truck slams into your side doing 60 and sends you airborne over a ravine. That crash made the evening news. "Local man killed in highway accident." The anchor reported that Vincent Carver had perished after his vehicle plunged off the road outside Denver. Authorities blamed bad weather and excessive speed. His remains weren't located for another 3 days. By then, the scavengers had had their fill. I made certain Chad caught the broadcast. From the condo across from his luxury tower, I had a clear line of sight straight through his massive glass windows. A good pair of binoculars gave me the rest. His face went pale the second the news anchor said Carver's name. Almost on cue, his phone rang. "Melanie, you saw the report, didn't you?" "I saw it." "That wasn't some random accident, Chad. Someone took him out. He knew what he was getting into, Mel. That was part of the job. What if we're next?" "We won't be. I've made arrangements." "What arrangements?" "I bought land in Costa Rica last year. No extradition treaty. Private. Remote. We lay low until this all blows over. I can't just leave everything behind. You've already lost it all, Mel. Your boutique went up in flames. Your ex came back from the dead. And now your cleanup guy is gone. This is over. Time to disappear." I listened as they went back and forth for another 20 minutes before the call finally ended. They planned to be wheels up in 72 hours, flying out of a hidden runway tucked into the hills outside the city. Just enough time to liquidate what they had and stash the money overseas. But I wasn't done with them yet. That's when Zeke entered the picture. 16 years old, homeless. I found him sleeping in the back of my storage locker, using old moving blankets for warmth. He'd been fending for himself ever since aging out of the foster system. "Tough, smart, invisible. You can crash here for now," I told him, "but I'll need a favor in return." "What kind of favor?" "I've got a project you might be able to help with." He sat quietly while I laid it all out. Every twisted detail about Melanie, Chad, the fire, my fake death, and the hired assassin. I showed him everything: texts, photos, surveillance audio. "So, this is like revenge?" he asked. "Something like that," he said with a casual shrug. "So, what's the assignment?" The kid didn't even blink. Confident, unshaken. Just the kind of nerve I needed for what came next. Chad and Melanie had taken refuge at the Quarry Lodge, a secluded luxury hideout nestled high in the mountains, a favorite escape for the rich and guilty. Private, remote, and nearly unreachable unless you came through the front gate. That is, unless you knew about the forgotten mining tunnels beneath the property. Over the course of 3 weeks, I'd studied every inch of the terrain, every trail, every blind spot, every entrance and exit. The resort sat atop a long-abandoned silver mine. Instead of demolishing the original structures, the developers had repurposed sections of the existing framework. Most of the tunnels had been closed off long ago, but I found one that still reached directly beneath the main building. Zeke's mission was clear and uncomplicated. Sneak inside, hide a few listening devices in Chad and Melanie's suite, and monitor their movements. He fit the role perfectly. Young, clean-cut, dressed like he belonged to some wealthy family sending their kid off for a pampered weekend retreat. "What happens if they catch me?" he asked, not out of fear, just curiosity. "They won't," I assured him. "You're quicker than they are. But if something feels wrong, you vanish." I lied, of course. There wouldn't be time for running if it went south. But Zeke handled the job like a pro. By sundown, I was tapped into every word spoken in that suite. Chad was finalizing shady deals over encrypted calls with offshore banks, while Melanie quietly packed away valuables, jewelry, bundles of cash, everything they hadn't already laundered. They planned to flee at sunrise, headed straight for the airport. But first, there was a farewell feast. Chad had arranged a last celebratory dinner, a private event in the lodge's exclusive banquet room, attended by the very people who'd built his crooked empire: corrupt politicians, arms dealers, professional launderers, the power brokers who'd helped him avoid prison at every turn. Dinner was scheduled for 8 o'clock sharp. The venue? A velvet-draped hall at the heart of the resort. It was the perfect trap. At 7:30, I made my move. Wearing a food service uniform I'd lifted from the laundry room, I slipped in unnoticed through the abandoned mine shaft. The basement was a maze of wine racks and outdated appliances. No cameras, no sensors, no alarms. I ascended the back stairwell and waited in a narrow corridor just behind the dining room. From a service slit, I watched as Chad raised a champagne glass from his seat at the head of the table. "My friends," he announced, "tonight we close one chapter and toast to the dawn of a new, brighter era. Here's to fresh starts and limitless possibility." "To Chad!" someone shouted, and glasses rang with cheers. Melanie sat beside him in a form-fitting black dress, probably worth more than my old pickup. She was visibly uneasy, glancing at her phone, eyeing the door, shifting in her seat. "Relax," Chad whispered, leaning in close. "By this time tomorrow, it'll all be behind us." "I don't know," she said softly. "I can't shake this feeling. Like someone's watching." "Who would that be?" he said, amused. "Your late husband?" "It's been over a month." "Then blame it on bad luck." "Vincent, the fire, maybe Denver just isn't safe anymore." When the appetizers had been cleared, I stepped into the scene. The lights cut out, total blackness. The backup system kicked in half a minute later. But those 30 seconds were all I needed. As illumination returned, I stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the emergency lights, weapon drawn and aimed squarely at Chad. "Evening, folks," I said. "Hope I'm not interrupting dessert." There were gasps and cries. 2 men reached instinctively under the table, until I pointed the gun their way. "Hands where I can see them," I commanded. "No sudden moves, no phones, unless you want to see if Mr. Delacroix can breathe through his sternum." Melanie's voice cracked. "Dean?" "Hello, sweetheart," I said calmly. "Did you miss me?" Chad remained seated, but the color drained from his face. "You're dead," he whispered. "Yeah, that was the plan," I replied, stepping further into the room. "You were supposed to protect your investors. Melanie was supposed to be faithful. And Vincent, he was supposed to be a professional." I offered a cold, bitter smile. "Seems none of us are very good at keeping our word." "What is it you're after?" Chad asked, barely above a whisper. "Justice," I told him. "This isn't justice. You're a terrorist." "That depends on your perspective." I advanced toward the table, unflinching. "Because from where I stand, this is justice. The people who tried to end my life, finally cornered, facing what they've earned." "We never tried to kill you." Really? Then how would you describe drugging a man, binding him to a chair, and leaving him teetering on the edge of a 200-foot drop? This time, Melanie's sobs weren't staged. They were genuine, ragged. It wasn't supposed to go that way, she cried. Chad told me it would be fast, that you wouldn't feel anything. Chad told you a lot, didn't he? I said. He promised you love, a perfect future, all of it, just as soon as I was gone. I do love her, Chad insisted. No, you love the payout, the property she got once I was dead, just like you loved Lisa, until something more profitable came along. Lisa ended her own life. She did, I said coldly. After I explained your real plan, how you'd drain her settlement and leave her with nothing. She died thinking there was no justice left for her. The entire room stiffened, not a sound. You're the reason Lisa's dead? Melanie asked, her expression turning pale. I gave her the truth, I said. Told her she could either swallow the betrayal or fight back. She chose revenge, but she couldn't live with it afterward. I gave a small, indifferent shrug. That wasn't my burden to carry. You're deranged. Maybe, I said calmly. Or maybe I finally accepted reality. The system doesn't protect people like me from people like you. The courts protect the rich. The police protect the powerful. Justice isn't fair, it's for sale. So you decided you were judge, jury, and executioner? Somebody had to. Chad moved slowly, hand dipping into his coat. I didn't stop him. I wanted to see what he thought he could pull off. Don't, Melanie whispered. Just stop. Chad pulled out an envelope, fat, sealed, thick. You want money, Dean? I've got money. Enough to disappear and start over. How much are we talking? 500 grand, he said, setting the envelope on the table. Right here. Right now. A few others in the room began to squirm. No one knew if this was turning into a negotiation or an execution. That's generous, I said. But what's the catch? No catch, Chad said. Take the money, vanish. We never see each other again. And Melanie? She comes with me. You and her, that's over, and we both know it. I looked at her, this woman I'd built a life with for 15 years. The same woman who tried to have me killed for a life insurance check. What about it, Mel? Fair trade? Her eyes darted between us, calculation flickering behind them. I want to go home, she said finally. Chad frowned. Home? That place burned down. Don't you remember the fire? I mean home, she said softly. My sister's house. California. As far from this mess as I can get. That's not the deal, he snapped. Maybe it should be, I said. You head to Costa Rica. She goes to California. I take the cash, and everyone walks away alive. Except justice, Chad sneered. Justice, I said, is whatever I say it is. A thick silence swallowed the room. Then Zeke's voice crackled through my earpiece. We've got company, came the urgent voice over the earpiece. A patrol vehicle from the sheriff's department had just rolled into view. Someone must have tipped them off, reported suspicious activity, the voice continued. Terry Moon, my old army buddy, had finally pieced it all together. Time to go live, I said quietly, stepping forward with purpose. Nobody moves. Keep your hands where I can see them. Dean, please, Melanie begged, her voice trembling now. We can still fix this. There's still time. I didn't flinch. You had 15 years to fix this, I said. You chose your path. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway, fast and closing in. From outside, Terry barked orders. Lock down the building. No one in or out until I say so. Chad sneered across the room. Looks like your genius plan just blew up in your face. Did it? I asked coolly, pulling a small device from my jacket pocket. It was the detonator, synced to the charges I'd rigged during their little dinner party. There's something most folks forget about old mining lodges, I said, sounding casual. Back in the day, they stored explosives everywhere. A lot of it never got cleared out. You're bluffing, Chad snapped. Want to bet your life on that? At that moment, the dining room doors flew open with a crash. Terry entered first, gun drawn. 2 deputies followed, weapons up and scanning. I lowered my hand slightly, just enough to show I wasn't acting yet. Evening, Terry. Took you long enough. I know everything, he said, leveling his gaze on me. The truck at the gorge. faking your death, hiring someone to take out Carver. It's all tied together. Then bring your evidence, I replied flatly. I don't need evidence to stop you, Dean, he said. I just need to act. He looked older than I remembered, his face marked by years of small-town compromises. This wasn't the job he'd signed up for, not chasing ghosts who refused to stay buried. They tried to end my life, I said, voice even. And where were you when I needed someone, anyone, to stop it? You never came to me, he answered. And if I had, I shot back. Chad owns half the town. The judges, the prosecutors, his legal team would have destroyed me. We'll never know now, Terry said. And he was right. The moment I faked my death, I'd close the door to justice through any court. Put the detonator down, Dean, he said gently. Don't do this. I can't. Why not? Because if I walk away, they walk free. Chad'll buy everyone's silence. Melanie will claim she was duped. And in a month, they'll be sipping martinis on a beach, spending the money stolen from my grave. That's not your call to make. Tonight it is. And I pressed the trigger. The first explosion came from below, a thunderous boom as the blast surged through the basement. Forgotten sticks of dynamite went off like dry twigs catching fire, devouring support beams in seconds. The entire structure moaned, then began folding in on itself. Get them out of here, Terry yelled. Guests panicked, running for exits that were quickly choked with smoke. Terry shoved Melanie toward a broken window, helping her escape while his deputies herded others out. I stayed behind, watching her silhouette disappear into the thick black fog. She glanced back once. There was no love in that look. Only pure primal fear. Chad wasn't so lucky. A blazing beam crashed down, blocking his escape and trapping him inside with me. He stumbled backward, hacking from the smoke, his eyes wild. This is insane, he coughed. You'll kill us both. That's the idea. Why? What do you hope to accomplish? Balance. This isn't justice, he wheezed. It's murder. Maybe, I said, but at least now you won't destroy anyone else. The ceiling sagged ominously as the structural supports began to buckle under the strain. We had maybe a minute or two before the entire place gave way. Without warning, Chad pulled a gun, something I hadn't realized he'd been carrying all along. I'm not dying here, he snarled. Oh, but that's exactly what's happening, I replied. He pulled the trigger twice. The first round went wide. The second tore into my shoulder, spinning me around and knocking the tool from my hand as I crashed into the wall. You should have taken the offer when you had the chance, Chad said, advancing with smug satisfaction. He never noticed Zeke slipping silently through the shattered window behind him. Zeke swung a flaming beam and struck Chad hard across the back, dropping him to the floor. Then he snatched up the tool I'd dropped and leveled it directly at Chad's head. Don't! I rasped, blood in my throat. That's not you! You weren't like this once either, Zeke replied. But I had a choice back then. So do you. He stood there frozen, glancing between us, struggling with the weight of the moment. The building groaned around us, timbers snapping, flames devouring what was left. We need to get out of here, he said at last. I'm not going. Why not? Because this is where it ends. Somewhere outside, Terry's voice cut through the smoke, calling my name. Flashlights flared and danced as rescue teams tried to find a way in. But the fire was spreading too fast for anyone to reach us. Get out of here, I told Zeke, my tone firm. Now. And him? He asked, motioning to Chad, unconscious from the smoke and the blow. Leave him. Dean, go. Zeke didn't argue again. He climbed back out the window and vanished into the night. He was sharp, he'd make it. I slumped into a half-burnt chair by the wall, blood dripping steadily from my shoulder. I didn't bother trying to stop it. None of that mattered anymore. Only the flames devouring everything Chad had built with the suffering of others. According to the fire marshal's report, the ceiling collapsed at approximately 2 a.m. By then, the entire lodge had been reduced to rubble. They found Chad's body in the ruins of the dining hall, charred beyond recognition. Mine they never recovered. Because I wasn't in there when the roof gave in, Zeke came back. He hauled me out through the same window moments before everything collapsed. We crawled together through the abandoned mine tunnels, slowly, painfully, until we emerged from a long-forgotten exit nearly 2 miles away, well beyond the lights and cameras. As he tore his shirt into strips and pressed them to my wound, I asked, "Why did you come back for me?" "You were right," he said. "Guys like us. The system doesn't protect people like us from men like Chad." "What I did still wasn't right," I murmured. "Maybe not. But it wasn't wrong either." We sat together on a hilltop, watching the fire finish what it started. The lodge was beyond saving, and the firefighters knew it. Terry stood near his cruiser, deep in conversation with men in black suits. The feds had already stepped in. "What happens now?" Zeke asked. "Now you vanish," I told him. "Find a new place. Change everything. Start fresh." "And you?" "I'm already a ghost, remember?" 3 months later, a package was delivered to Sheriff Terry Moon's desk. It contained everything. Complete documentation of Shad Delacroix's arms-dealing operation. Client lists, bank statements, wire transfers, contracts. Every piece needed to unravel the entire network. The FBI didn't waste time. Within days, a dozen arrests were made. 2 state senators, a federal judge, and several high-ranking executives. Chad, it turned out, had been the linchpin in a massive criminal empire stretching back decades, funneling weapons to extremists around the world. Melanie avoided prosecution. She turned state's evidence, blaming everything on manipulation and coercion. She vanished to California, opened a quiet flower shop, and lived comfortably off the insurance money from my death. Lisa Delacroix was cleared of all wrongdoing. Her anonymous tip had been the key to unlocking the case. She was hailed as a brave whistleblower. A fund was established in her name to support victims of domestic abuse. Terry opted for early retirement. He moved to Florida and never spoke about the case again. His final report stated that Dean Calloway perished in the Quarry Lodge fire while attempting to bring Shad Delacroix to justice. And in a sense, he wasn't wrong. The man I used to be, faithful husband, honest worker, believer in the system, that version of me died on that mountain. The one who crawled out of those tunnels was something else entirely. Forged by betrayal, hardened by fire. Someone who finally understood, if the system won't protect the innocent, then someone else has to. Someone willing to step out of the shadows and strike back. They were right. Dean Calloway no longer existed. But something else rose from his ashes. And for every corrupt official, every predator in a tailored suit, that something had one clear message. Be afraid. Because I'm not done.